I did take an opportunity to thank Erica and the folks at the Interop Lab here for just a fantastic week. It's been great to be here. Given the state of New Hampshire's key role in the United States presidential election, I do, however, blame New Hampshire for the absolutely pitiful set of candidates that we're at right now. So if you're a supporter of both of those, then I've hopefully not insulted you too terribly much. But anyway, this is the best we have. I could throw a dart at any person in this room and you would do a better job than where we are. So, great thing about video editing is none of this will appear on the, because I know we'll get into that. But I want to thank Erica for just a great week, and thank the UNH IOL folks for doing a fantastic job. We look forward to being back. We look forward to growing our AppFests and PlugFests, the kinds of things that we talked about with CASTOR, with ISDX, get improved by the interrelationship with vendors, developers, and the testing community, and we look forward to those things continuing to happen. As I mentioned, my name is Rick Bauer, and I serve as the Technical Director for Open Networking Foundation. I want to talk very briefly about our open source SDN efforts. This presentation will be available on our website, and you can download it and all that happy stuff. We'll talk a little bit about where open source is going. I think all of us have a good sense that this is a juggernaut, and yet how do we get to commercial adoption of products that are in open source? This, I think, is the next frontier. Want to throw a little Eastern philosophy at you for just a moment. Part of this presentation was delivered to the China SDN and NFE Industry Alliance in China, about 50 companies that are hard at it with respect to SDN and NFE. We'll spend most of our time talking about what we're doing in the software space and where you can plug in if you're a developer, where you can plug in if you're a company developing software open source and you want to take it to a more open environment than simply hosting it in your company's website. And then for the first time, you're going to hear about a name change that will be announced next month. The entity Open Source SDN is now going to be changed to ONF SDN. I will tell you all the reasons why we do that, and then at 6 o'clock tonight we'll be done. All right? And I'm not going to tell you any of the reasons, but no, seriously, we'll talk. And then just where we're going in the future, and if you'd like to plug in how you can do that. It is an open source world. 78, this is the annual Black Duck Future of Open Source. By the way, just if you are interested in open source and want to understand the trends, it's a great website, a lot of good information on there. I've got a link to it there. But these are major companies. Over 2,000 said their companies are run part or all of its operations on open source, and that's not just using the LAMP platform or something like that. 66% said their company creates software for customers built on open source, and in their trajectory, 93% said their organization's use of open source is going to continue to increase from the past year. What is really interesting is the fact that corporations are starting to realize that working on an open source project is increasingly the job description of many of the developers within their shop, either partial FTE or full-time FTE in that shop, up 50% from 2014. 88% are expected to increase contributions to open source projects. So if you're a student who is looking for being hired in this world, your resume is your GitHub account. What projects are you working on? What are you contributing on? Now's the time to get involved, and even if it's just cleaning up ARPIT's bad code, or no, I mean just writing README files and help files and aligning things, keeping up with revs and whatever. These are the kinds of skills that you have to start somewhere. And after a couple of years of doing this, you'll find yourself getting more and more confident, making more and more contributions, being respected, getting some Git cred, as it were. Is that a word, Git cred? Credibility in terms of your contribution. That plus your university degree will, I think, go a long way. Open source is becoming the default approach for companies as they start thinking, not do we have to do it open source, but what's out there already that we can either use right out of the tarball, or we can modify for our own uses. In the next 2 to 3 years, 39% of these companies will start their own external open source projects. 47% are now are planning to release their own tool sets to projects as open source, and 53% are trying to work to reduce barriers to employee participation. So the idea that as a developer you were working in an open source project as sort of some kind of hobby, or at night, or because you don't like TV, or something like that, those days are going away, and this is becoming more of the 9 to 5 or 7 to 8, whatever the work day is, expectation. And I've talked to a number of corporate leaders. How do we make sure that the people who are working in these open source projects are being managed correctly, are being managed properly, are being given feedback, that their managers are aware of what he or she is doing in this open source environment? It's not like they're punching a clock that's visible to the rest of the corporation. And so this new role is something that even the HR aspects of this are still being worked out. Companies are using open source for a variety of reasons, but what's really interesting is so many of the objections toward open source are being addressed by the use of open source. For the longest time, open source is inherently insecure, because the assumption was that if one party designed the security, it would be inherently more secure. And that's based on the number of problems with software that is a daily part of our news. We realize that it's not necessarily so. That in the counsel of many, in the presence of many counselors, the ancient Hebrew proverb says, there is much wisdom. And so in the contributions of many coders with a lot of different perspectives, the code can become stronger. It's a mixed use from the natural environment. It's a mixed use forest that is heterogeneous, that is most resistant to disease and influx. It's these, if you live in Colorado, you know that there are these huge stands of ponderosa pine and aspen that really take up an entire county, and they're all falling prey to a Chinese beetle. And what happens is, after about 3 years, the entire forest is knocked down. And so you really just have to cut down dead tree. There's nothing else there. So that one monolithic biome becomes devastated by a single infection. And I think there's a parallel in the software world as well. So 55% believe that open source delivers superior security. 58% believes that it scales better. And one of the bugaboos of open source was always being able to deploy it. Even that's getting better. And so these things are things that used to be the reasons why people don't deploy open source solutions are quickly becoming some of the leading reasons why they do. That gap is going to widen in the future. Here we see just a variety of estimations, and these are pretty smart people as far as the increased quality, how security will get better, and ease of use and ease of deployment. These are the sort of the pain points with respect to OSS. And so we have, yeah, I did pose for that picture. I'm in the little blue car there. This really does fuel competitive advantage. Companies are realizing they can't do everything, and that their core secret sauce, their core differentiation is not in providing all the aspects of the software enterprise or the networking enterprise. But if they have brilliance, if they have something that distinguishes their products, that it doesn't necessarily have to be every aspect of the software development or the product stack. And so you're seeing companies, you know, that long ago they realized, look, we don't have to make paper clips and rubber bands. Those things are out there. We don't need to make our own loose leaf paper. We can specialize a little bit closer and focus on our core competencies, and that's what you're seeing with software. So that's the sense that our competitive advantage as a company, as an organization, is going to be more narrow. We'll rely on a pool of contributions from a community. And so I think this really explains the rise of ONOS, the rise of ODL, the rise of RIU, that every company that started out in SDN 4 or 5 years ago said, well, we're going to write our own proprietary controller, and we're going to embed that, and we're going to have a soup to nuts SDN solution, and you have to buy our stack, thinking that the openness of SDN would really be enclosed in a completely hermetically sealed proprietary wrapper, and that's just not the way it's worked out. I just in presenting this slide, I kept this one slide. This is from Lao Tzu in the United States, pronounced Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching. He talks about one of the secrets. This is an ancient Chinese philosopher 5,000 years ago who was a Python programmer. We've been able to determine that archaeologically. His writings translated say, to act and not to own, to bear and not to own, to act and not lay claim, to do the work and let it go, for just letting it go is what makes it stay. And you know, it said it's a proverbial wisdom from ancient China, but this really is what I think encompasses the ethos of open source, the open source endeavor, that we're bearing without owning. That the secret of the success of CASTOR will be not just the work that's being done, and not just be the ways in which it's being leveraged commercially, but it will be the extent to which other people perceiving this, other organizations perceive that there's a role that they can participate in and be able to bring value out of as well. The more you cling to this, the less power you have. It's a very ironic kind of reversal of roles there. And it says and finally he said, for just letting it go is what makes it stay. And increasingly, the openness of a particular project or platform in the minds of a bigger and bigger community will realize the extent to which this is open, the extent to which I can get to these interfaces, I can leverage them, the licensing regimes that allow me to either fork this and make it commercial, or make variances that reflect the needs of my particular products or customers. Those are going to be the things that win. All right, and we'll just go from there. All right, I want to talk briefly about our open source SDN software portfolio. We're now at OpenSourceSDN.org. We've got 32 open source SDN projects, 1,500 downloads per month. We've gone from 0 community members a year ago to over 1,000. I got the counts this morning, 1,080. These are active logins per month in our first year. Certainly, we have a long way to go, and our particular niche is not in building a large controller organization, or a large like an ONOS or a large Linux Foundation project, and charging the major participants $300,000 or $400,000 to join. We think that the OSSDN, soon to be called ONF SDN, there's a place for startups, there's a place where we can serve as an incubator, there's a place where projects that are mid-size in terms of maturity can mature to the point where larger organizations can make 6- and 7-figure investments at a certain point. But they're not ready yet. They want to see more work and on what is proof of concept kinds of validation. So that's kind of what we've been working on. You see our growth here. The AppFest is part of that. We'll continue to do projects that look at testing from a variety of aspects, from conformance to performance benchmarking. The applications will, in many ways, be the drivers of future activities. So I could imagine CASTOR or ISDX coming in and wanting to test it against a whole suite of different controllers or applications that are going to be running on top of some of these things being validated in real time. That's really where it's all about. Our licensing is Apache 2.0, which to this day seems to be the most commercial friendly licensing regime that's out there. All of the documents that are produced by Open Source SDN and posted in our environment are Creative Commons. If they're not README files and derivatives of the code base, but are standalone things like PowerPoint slides and movies and other documents and content, we license those Creative Commons 4.0 which makes them easy to use, to adapt, to modify. The only restriction is just that you cite where you got it from, just what your 8th grade English teacher told you. So, and so this is where we're at. We have a portal, we have a community environment, and then we have our GitHub software environment. As GitHub takes on more and more functionality, and we've watched that the last 5 years, more of the tool sets will be native to GitHub. We're working with a number of folks who work at GitHub to try to say, all right, look, can we get something to replace IRC? Can we get a really good blog product so that we're not having, the front-facing site hosted over here, the community part of it over here, and that sort of spread of products is still, unfortunately, too much out there. But we're hoping to be able to make that a little bit easier, and the GitHub folks realize that they've got the market to lose if they don't. Just go to SourceForge, and you'll find out, how quickly you can go from being on top to being what's that in this world. So just something to keep in mind. Here's a challenge that we have in SDN. You start at the bottom and you start looking up, and we were talking with the National Institute of Standards and Technology earlier this week. The sheer breadth of choices, the sheer possibilities that are inherent in OpenFlow and other SDN configurations make this such a it's almost as if the options and the opportunities are so broad, it's hard to get started. I can, you walk into a food cupboard or into a kitchen and you have all these opportunities. What do you want to make? And there's so many options, sometimes just getting the menu right becomes difficult. When you look at the silicon layer, when you look at the various aspects of hardware, you've got white boxes and various kinds of bright boxes and various kinds of configurations. Controllers that range from proprietary, we mentioned ONOS and Ryu and ODL, various other controllers, where the application at the network level is going to be things like load balancing and peering and whatnot. And then increasingly, how are we going to orchestrate or bolt this into a complete application? And so OpenStack, CloudStack, am I going to manage this in NetComp or SNMP? And so this becomes a menu of options with thousands of different permutations. And it is absolutely impossible to do SDN this way. It looks fantastic. It's a pretty chart, and it's absolutely intimidating for, I'm using a proprietary network management system and a single vendor to manage that particular network, and I want to do SDN, and I look at all this stuff online and I'm absolutely paralyzed. And is there any reason why the adoption curve is not going higher, but rather saying, I'm going to wait until this gets a lot easier. I need a tarball and some instructions, and not going over here and here and here and here. Imagine building a car where you had to buy your own tires, and you had to buy your own engine, and you had to buy your own steering wheel, and you had to put it all together in your garage, and then you could drive. I don't want to do all that. I want to just drive the freaking car, all right? And if you've ever tried to build things, you experience those emotions, all right? So what we've tried to do is work towards solving that. ONF as an organization, and then with our open source environments, are really trying to find ways to combine the wisdom of all these communities into some ways that make the use of SDN a little bit, the ramp to launch and get skilled in this, a little bit easier to get in. ATRIUM is probably our biggest project, but we have, as I mentioned, 32 other ones. This is really a set of open source software distributions, and what we're trying to do is more of a systems integration effort than anything else. We're trying to build using easily identifiable components, putting them into a distribution that has correct drivers and correct deployment and a lot of good documentation that can help people along the way. We found that companies like Wipro and other systems integration companies are now joining our open source efforts, because what they're seeing is, wow, this is an SI job. It really is. It's not as much, the people who are writing code will continue to write code, but the real need here is for people who can put these components together and make them work more coherently. And so this is how the interoperability issues in SDN are being addressed in ATRIUM. The application, we're really not going to do a whole lot with that. We'll take it, whatever it is, without all the pipeline details, and we'll use either flow objectives or TTPs or some kind of way of communicating those requests into drivers at the driver set, and then at this point using OpenFlow 1.3 into various different pipelines. And so this is the idea of trying to abstract instructions at certain layers and not having to write an entire stack from scratch. Some of the early ATRIUM work was helping companies write drivers. Our developer was writing drivers for weeks and weeks because companies didn't know how to write into an SDN ecosystem. And so there was a lot of education and evangelism along the way. And so we're now taking these stacks and we're saying, okay, what are end users, and by that network operators, enterprise data center operators, people who are managing particular functions in corporate IT, what do they need? Is it an open stack? Is it a cloud stack? Or what is that combination? And then figuring out what the hardware stack is and working toward greater hardware interoperability in that way. So there's a vertical as well as a horizontal component on this. Pre-integrated, interoperable, and deployable. Those are the goals of ATRIUM. A lot of this information is on our website. We started with 2015A, which was BGP over ONOS, and 16A is BGP over ODL, and 16A is a spine leaf configuration with ONOS. So our goal is to use the major controllers. We'll do work with Ryu, we'll do work with Open Daylight, we'll do work with ONOS, depending on where we think and where our operators tell us the action is. We're not trying to make the market go one way or the other. We listen to end users who say, I want this, or I want this particular intrusion detection app, or this quality of service app. That explains some of our other work. 2016, by the fall of this year, by Q3, we'll have 2016B. We just had the year in alpha for our releases. We'll be doing ATRIUM Enterprise, which is unified communications management with SDN. What's really interesting is we had a project called Aspen that actually won a number of awards in the OpenFlow, the SDN OpenFlow World Congress last year in Dusseldorf. Basically they had written a QoS application to run Skype and Link and sort of these over-the-top applications in a better quality of service without having to re-architect the entire network. When you've got a VoIP circuit and it's off with just the latency tolerances are really pretty unforgiving if you've ever had a bad circuit or an echo or feedback or those sorts of things. And imagine the CEO wanting to do a desktop conference for 80,000 employees worldwide, and he or she wants a certain kind of quality and will not tolerate any variance of that, and you are the network guru who's got to make that work. If you don't know the phrase magic weekend, that's really what happens, and you basically tear out your router sitting there with your RS2 232 interconnects and CLI, and you're making pathways such that the quality of service for that app will take the highest priority of any interconnect that you have in your enterprise. And then when he's done or she's done in 30 minutes or 3 hours, depending on how terrible they are, then you've got another magic weekend to bring it back to the original state. That's a terrible use of very expensive resources. What the Aspen app did was to use edge devices outside of the main director class switches, and even the top of rack, right over the top of the rack kinds of configurations, to be able to deliver QoS at that place, and then turn it off when you're done. And so this was something that was done and demonstrated last year, and companies like, well, I can't mention them, major cable companies, major telcos, major over-the-top providers that rhyme with Netflix and Omcast, and anyway, you get the idea. Said, you know, wow, we want to deliver a quality of service, 1080p or 4K or whatever it is, to the curb. And Aspen sounds like it could really be helpful here. I don't want to have to re-architect my entire streaming service. I'd rather do this at the edge. And so we're building an ATRIUM enterprise expression that will have this real-time media QoS application sitting there with an intent-based, and that's another project we have called Boulder, that will be able to manage QoS in, we're running like 40 streams, now we want to do about 5,000 just to see, you know, if we can deliver and scale this up. So the UC-SDN project, and now these companies are joining this because they realize there can be some commercial value here. We mentioned ISDX, I just included it, and we mentioned CASTOR. These are some of the other projects that we're working on. Steamboat, I mentioned Aspen. Delta is a really interesting project. It was originally named Florence. Florence is the site in Colorado of the Supermax prison where all the really bad people are, and so this is the security SDN project. It was named Delta because I think they now have delusions of grandeur. They're now the Delta Force, and so anyway, but they're building a security framework for SDN and with SDN. That debut will be in October of this year. The next generation of what OpenFlow will look like, protocol independent forwarding, is another project. Durango, Eagle, Centennial. We're using open source code for information modeling between NetConf and Yang and a lot of other products instead of trying to reinvent information modeling. What's the standards development organizations who believe in openness until somebody else comes along and wants to build their standard, and then they fight because they don't really want people going to their whatever. ONF decided, you know what we really need, instead of multiplying standards groups and tool sets and whatever, is some open source tools that everyone can use. And that's been a great contribution from a lot of different groups, the TM Forum, Etsy, NFV, folks from IEEE, from ITT, and MEF, a bunch of other groups who are working on that. So these are some of our projects. Our goals are that particularly with ATRIUM, we're trying to build use case driven distributions to continue to drive interoperability. We want to take standards that are being built increasingly, as we see this overlay between, it's the wrong word, but this overlap between NFV and SDN. We're seeing the need to manage more holistically in this area and integrate standards that are being developed or being developed on the fly in other organizations, so that we can, at the bottom, create a path to money. And that's, ONF has always been about commercial adoption. We don't think that SDN should, while so many great projects started in academic incubators, and we absolutely need that continued work. I just think of the stuff that's represented right here and where it came from. We think that the true and sustaining value of these tools will be in their commercial use. This is another way of looking at our stack of projects from service providers, from internet exchange, enterprise, interop things, campus, education and training. We had a driver competition, and we had a sample tap application, and just so that people could use, just like the northbound company that has the Zodiac switches that you may have seen at the AppFest. These are learning switches. These are learning tools. You can put Mininet up there, and you know, it's a 10100 switch. You're not gonna power a Google data center with it, you know, or whatever. Your kid may not even want it on his Xbox, but you know, they're the kinds of things that you can take baby steps and learn along the way. We publish a report every month of the projects, and anyone can join that. Anyone can join any of these projects. In closing, I want to share just a couple of news items. Open source SDN is now going to become ONF SDN. What we found was people were searching for ATRIUM, and they had to go to open source SDN /ATRIUM. The namespace got really confusing. We were trying to create an entity that had a hands-off relationship between ONF and an open source entity. We were able to solve that pretty easily without creating a whole new entity, and so we're calling it ONF SDN. It gives a better organizational identity and visibility. None of the projects changed. They'll be easier to find. The tool sets will be easier as well. So, we're now in the final selection phase for our logos, so they will be beautiful. They'll be the same color palette that you know and love. We have a technical steering committee that we've created for the new environment. Membership is open to all. You want to help lead a project, then help lead a project. Code and contributions really make the difference there. It's not like you show up and say, I want to lead this. You work, you make a contribution, and people recognize that. So ONF SDN _ TSC, Technical Steering Committee, at this open source SDN. That will change, that URL will change, but everything will do this automatically. As I mentioned earlier, we had 3 projects that were donated to our repositories in March and April of this year. We have another one that's a corporation is donating a major project, and there's a fair amount of legal stuff that has to be done with all this stuff, so I'm spending more and more time with lawyers these days. And anyway, that's what we're doing. If you have a project that you're working on had a couple of grad students from Indiana University. They said we wanted to create an SDN flight data recorder. We wanted something that would be retrospective. Here's what happened, and here's how it happened, and here's at this point, you know, what was changed and all this. But to have a recorder of the activities of that particular, and they said, look, we'd like to build this. We right now it's in our dorm room, and we'd like it to have a little bit more visibility. Maybe there's some other people in the world who would like to help on this, and so we created a space for them, and away they go. So if you've got ideas, if you're a company who's saying, you know what, we've been working on this, we think it's ready to share with our colleagues, or we think that we can't get it past the next level and we need the help of a community. We have some FTEs. What we don't want is somebody just saying, we're done with this code and we're not going to really use it anymore, so we're going to get some PR by donating it and then sort of walking away. It's like donating your dirty laundry. We really don't want to. We don't want to clean it up because it doesn't fit us anyway. So, but if it's a viable project, we try to accept projects. We try to use the limited funds we have to market them, to give them visibility. We've done webinars on SDX Central, other places. We'll take the videos that we've created today and we'll try to push those around. We have our demos at shows and things like that. We don't have quite the marketing heft of some of the larger projects, but we think there's a place in the growth cycle for all of these when they're in that infancy or adolescent stage where they need help, they need some experience, they need a little bit of guidance, a little bit more visibility than they're able to muster on themselves, or company realizes that I can do open source a little bit more intentionally and a little bit more openly, if that's the right word, if I do it in an open environment. We're like the United Nations of open source SDN in that respect. So I'm done with all the information I wanted to present today. Who's got the first question? Yeah, go ahead.
So, from the intention of being getting adopted to a commercial product from open source, what I have observed in the past couple of years is one of the key aspects to customers is controller redundancy, and I have seen every controller push that away as sort of, okay, it's your baby, we do the functional aspect of it, you go do the redundancy and high availability piece. So is that something getting into ONF as a serious project? How is that getting addressed?
I think you're spot on with your observation that the idea that a network operator, a network engineer is going to download, install, and rip out everything that it may not have been perfect, but it was working, and now be expected to use skills that he or she has not used or never used to maintain this, or to, you know, it works great at the demo booth, but can I scale this? Can I rip out 1,000 Barracuda boxes if I'm doing intrusion detection? And can I really scale with you know, those little 6 network, you know, 6-node network boxes that I got at Best Buy? Am I really going to be able to do that? Probably not. So ATRIUM, I think, is trying to address the scalability issue. The Aspen project showed, okay, this can work in terms of QoS in a limited scale. All right, how do you replicate that and scale it out for a cable company, or for a Netflix, or for some organization that needs to be able to deliver this? Microsoft has been using this original code base for Skype internally as a corporate app, and started working with HP and NEC to figure out how they could make it scale, and it was given away as an add-on to help Skype for Business work a little bit better, but it was never, the scalability part of it was never really developed that much. And so hopefully by doing their work, they haven't walked away from the project, but they're doing that work in public, more people are jumping in, and now we have, now it's getting pulled by the people who are the content providers who really need this application to scale. So I think that's probably one example. I look at projects like CASTOR and projects like ISDX. I think they're at the stage where, okay, the proof of concept is there. We've scaled this at 10 nodes, 20 nodes, 40 nodes, 50 nodes, but what does real world business look like? We need some partners. We need some other corporate entities to step in to provide, the support money, the equipment, the funds to go to IOL, the UNH IOL for a week and bring all these folks in and do an AppFest around this, those sorts of things. And so hopefully we can have a role there. But you've hit your hammer on a, hope you haven't hurt yourself, as I am doing right now. But you've hit the nail on what the real problem is here in terms of, we've proved that it can work. We proved that if you're in a hyperscale org like Google and Facebook and everyone in your network staff wrote a PhD thesis in advanced packet, morphology, yeah, they can probably provide the support for it. But what about me? I'm the guy who's got the 100 to 200 server or VM instance, and I got to manage, and I don't have those skill sets. I can't write Python. I need to be able to take that knowledge and leverage it more easily, and that's not there right now. So, good question. Other question? Yes.
To what extent are commercial switch vendors involved in this?
We've got white box folks, of course, and so ONF has a number of members who are in Taiwan. We have the National Benchmarking Lab that does a whole lot of white box switch conformance testing, things like that. So they're in there, the soft switches, the Quaggas, those sorts of folks. But then we've got the bright box folks. We've got the NoviFlows and the Corsas and the HPs and the NECs who are saying, yeah, we want to be open flow. We don't think you'll be ripping out your Cisco and HP and NEC gear and buying Belkin. Not that Belkin's bad or anything like that, but we understand that that for load, for intelligence, for horsepower, those sorts of things, we're going to need to go there. So it's a mix. ONF's challenge is always to make sure that we don't go completely white box or completely bright box. And so in the ATRIUM distributions, we've had a mix in all of those. We've tried to go after Open Compute project, which has been attractive to a lot of the white box crowd. We work with them, but we have members like Cisco and HP and NEC and whatever we want. They don't always show up, but we appreciate those who do, and those companies that are here this week are a good example. So, good question. Other questions? Have we met that magic 12:30 mark? Arvid's saying, yeah, that's what I came here for. All right, thank you so much for your help. What we'd like to do is to go get your lunch and drinks and whatever, and then come back, and we're going to hear from China Mobile in just a few moments. Okay? All right. Thank you very much, and enjoy your lunch.